provide you an overview of a new report and a new tool that's been developed, which is Development Retail Monitoring Tool. It's called Changing Lanes, and it's really looking at monitoring the retail impact of these changes that we're making to our road infrastructure in particular. So I'll hand over to you guys.
Kia ora koutou, thank you very much, and thank you, Siobhan, for that. My name is Melissa Davey, I'm from the Economic Wellbeing team, and I'm here with my colleague Martin Rosevear from the Research and Evaluation team. So we're going to be giving you a very quick tour through the report and also the work that's gone in behind the tool that sits in behind the data that we're seeing. The report is preliminary, but we wanted to share our thinking with you at this stage and get your feedback as well as we progress in the development of this tool. So the city, as we all know, is changing, and with any change, particularly road layout change, comes quite a lot of nervousness and uncertainty. So that we can help business confidence and decision making, we've developed a development retail monitoring tool that produces data to help us understand retail spend trends across defined areas of construction activity. And this is not just for cycleways, this is also for any infrastructure project we're doing, including digging up pipes. This data forms the basis of the Changing Lanes report, and there will be printed copies coming in the next very shortly, so apologies for not having these with you just yet, but they will be here any minute now. The intention is to produce a Changing Lanes report and publish this every 6 months, with this May edition being the first version. The data also feeds into other processes across council and is a systematic way for us to bring data to you. So it forms part of our development response plan, which you will be familiar with now, and the development response plan has 3 key components to it. It's how we mitigate, ensuring the city can continue to function through times of significant change. How we support businesses to manage that disruption through this transition time, and the communications approach, the positively Porniki, how we take Wellingtonians on the journey. And this new data will feed into all 3 areas of the development response plan. So just to give you an overview of the processes and how we'll use the data, essentially there's kind of 3 stages. There's a proactive engagement pre-work. So as it stands now, construction projects engage with retailers or businesses surrounding the area of work before the work starts. And as part of their usual construction planning and implementation. While the works continue on, we'll be able to use this tool to understand retail spend and the impacts that the work may or may not have to the retailers in that immediate area. We're able to look at any trends that we're seeing in that retail spend data and then decide what we're going to do with that, essentially. And we've got a number of different pieces of reactive support which are available for businesses, including the project manager of the construction project. That will continue on as per normal. We also have our Central City manager who is able to have conversations with businesses within that Central City area, and of course the new City in Transition Business Advisory Service, and that includes a dedicated business support manager, and that service is being delivered by Wellington NZ. And sorry, just back on that, the business support service through Wellington NZ will be basically twofold. So there's the individual advisory service, so that's where the manager can work directly with a business to understand their business model, understand their cash flow, where there may need to be some capability building, those sorts of things. But then more broadly, that promotional activity to continue to drive people into the area or into the centre. So it's shop and win promotions, shop local, those sorts of things. So as I mentioned, this is a preliminary report, and that's because the tool is a prototype at this stage, and Martin will cover that off with you in more detail about how this all works from a technical perspective in a minute. But the next steps for us are to peer review the tool. We have some thoughts about how that is and who will be involved in that before we go public with the information that we have found. And we'll also be using the data, so not only the 6-monthly report, but we'll also be using this on an ongoing basis to feed into our existing Poneke Pulse economic monitor. So we will be monitoring spend across different areas on a fortnightly basis. This is an ongoing process, and then we'll be able to feed that into those other processes mentioned. So I'm going to hand over to Martin now, who is going to talk about the technicalities of the tool.
Thank you, Mel. So we've called it TRAM, and it's obviously short for Developmental Retail Activity Monitor. So we are looking at what we see in terms of spend from the retailers that sit along an area of road that we may be having an impact on. And I think we'll go to the next one. Welcome. How are you doing? A little bit of an overview of where data comes from, how we bring in that data. There's certain rules about privacy, the merchants, how we group them, and some of the exclusions, ifs, buts, and wonder. I suppose in the overview, it is very much a flag. It doesn't solve any problems. It's simply the tool that we use to coordinate a lot of people across council and to act as a focus in where are the issues. And if we, So it starts with the merchants. This comes from market view data, or it comes from Worldline as the official origin of this data. These are FPOS transactions, and so as soon as you buy something using an electronic card at any one of our merchants, mostly this will get recorded via this system. As I say, it's not the whole network, it's around about 70%. Here's just a snapshot of the merchants that we've got access to. Now, there's a little bit of a rarity. A number of people have taken steps in this area. This would not normally be available to us, this detailed level of where the merchants are. So Market View have said, we'll do what we can to help you out here, and here we have it here. So we know the merchants that will be sitting alongside a particular area of road that we're about to dig up, and we can focus on them within reason, within privacy constraints. So that's where it starts, how we group those merchants, how we visualise them. Yes, they're different groupings. So the cyan ones, they're Lambton. Yes, correct. The yellow are Courtenay, Te Aro, and the red is Dixon Street. So it's just little groupings that are of relevance to us. Okay. Again, the start of this is what are the spend rhythms within the city? That's our starting point. So what would we expect to see? Okay, and this is very high level. And the first thing that you can see from here is Christmas. It's seasonality. The city spend peaks hugely during Christmas. Immediately after Christmas, we leave. Following that, we come back in dribs and drabs. Okay? And if you look carefully in September and October, you'll see an event there. That's wow. Okay, so we've got a few. Those are the top level ebbs and flows of spend in the city. Next one. So that sets the context for something specific. This was Thorndon Quay. This was the change of the parking spaces from angle to parallel. It's slightly mixed in with COVID. You can see the purple is the COVID lockdown. The green is where the works were happening. And the magenta is the spend that we're observing. And we see, somewhat strangely, while we're doing the works, that the spend peaked. And we see this as, I suppose, a relatively simple interpretation as we were locked up and we wanted our homes to be as best as they could be. And so there's a lot of homeware providers down in that precinct. So that's our interpretation of that this was pent-up demand. It was to be expected. Not for the disruption that was being caused on the road, but it was to be expected for other reasons. Post that, after the works have finished, we see that spend starting to settle down and starting to follow the longer term trend that we would expect. Okay. Next. Now this is Tinakori. Now we didn't do works on Tinakori Road, but we did it adjacent, and there was a lot of media focus on it. I lost a coffee on this one because I expected the trend would be down, okay, and it wasn't. But let's look at what the trends were. So we've put the cyan code in there, which is suburban. This is what we would sort of nominally expect to see, and that's based on how does spend move over a week. So, all right, and adjacent.
It was the Glenmore Street.
Yes, this was
the cycleways.
The works were on the western side of the street, but these are merchants that are on the eastern side. So the works didn't impact directly these merchants. Not directly, but they did remove parks in that eastern side of the street. So this is a bit of a trial, was to see, well, are there these interactions? Because the media commentary was that there were. Okay, sorry, I'll keep going. All right.
Yeah, we can send it through to you.
Okay. What's the takeaway here? We expect that the people that are spending in this precinct are fairly well-to-do, and so we see when there's a spend uptick, that's Christmas, we see quite an amplification. When we all depart after Christmas, it slides down significantly. And then after the works, we see a recovery nominally close to where the benchmark is tracking. There's a little bit of a dip post-April. We can't readily explain that, but we do see that dip post-March, actually, in early April. All right, so those are two examples. So the summary. TRAM is a tool to measure spend. It is just a flag, it doesn't solve problems, but we try to think that it provides some clarity in a rather noisy environment where we have a bit of theatre going on. The report that we expect to circulate, which should be available at some stage, will give you more detail on that. And the summary is that we haven't seen a lot of significant activity. In one example, we saw a decline in spend during works, but it recovered after the works. So the summary of it, from a spend perspective, was little change. Now, in detail, if we talk to individual merchants, that is not always the case. But that is beyond this tool, but it's not beyond our remit as council. I must emphasise it is supported by a large team effort. So some are here today. There are a number of people running it, and it is the focus of coordination among a number of people who are involved in the engagement. This is the report that we have. Okay, so we'll have this circulated. This is an output from the data that we gather here. It's subject to peer review. The other additional. Yes. It will go out through Poniki Pulse, and I extend an invitation to a workshop where we will look under the hood. As I say, that will be part of our peer review process. It's part technical, it's part how do we interface to our merchants in this world, which can be at times challenging. So we'll yet to confirm a date for that, but that will be circulated at some stage. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, team. So just a reminder for councillors. So this report was presented in this session because there were lots of questions about retail and the impact on what our future projects might have in business. So the team were just giving an early report because it's quite timely. The rest of the session is based primarily around the Golden Mile, but if you'd want to ask some quick questions about this particular report before we move on to the Golden Mile, I will start with Councillor Free.
Yes, so it says that cash and online payments are excluded. So is it basically credit card or is it also debit cards?
Any EFTPOS transactions, correct, yes.
Councillor McNulty.
This is great. Are there any other variables that you can pull in from the provider, like average retail spend or things along those lines to help, just get a fuller picture?
It measures, in aggregate, it measures around about 70% of all retail or EFTPOS retail spend. So we have access to that at the same time, which is your benchmarks that you would have seen up there. So yes, where we can, where we think it's relevant, we'll try to put those up at the same time.
Cool. I'm not seeing any other questions. I'm sure there will be over the next wee while, so we'll just email those through. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, team. Much appreciated. Okay, we are now going right into the Q&A session for the Golden Mile. Now, just a couple of notes. A reminder, this is not debate. These are for legitimate questions, and that we're to treat our staff and our partners with respect, and let's just be chill. Okay. Does anyone have a question? Oh, yeah, come on over, Sarah. Thank you. I'll give you a couple of minutes to note down some of your questions.
Apologies, can people use their mics? We can't hear anything if there's questions being asked.
Oh, no, there are none. We're just sitting here.
We're just having an awkward silence.
But I will kick off with Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. And I'll go straight to clause 47 on page 47 of our papers, which is the budget, as you may not have it, but it says the budget for Golden Mile is now 129.9 million at P50 and up to 139.4 million at P95 based on the 60% detailed design. Now, I'm interested to understand, what does that 60% detailed design mean in the context of the Hutt Road, which is at 100% design, and the probability of the cost of, if it's only at 60% of the design, what will that mean to the end cost of the Golden Mile?
I can I can start, and then I'll ask I'll ask our CFO to comment. So one of the things we've done, because obviously at 60% design you still have some uncertainties, we have had an IQRA assessment, and what that tells us is that our costs are right pretty much on the money. There was about a $4 million difference between the work we had done and the way that the numbers had come out and the work of the IQRA. So we could talk in more detail about that if you wished, but I'll also pass over to Sarah, who is our CFO and can explain further.
I mean, I just know is, what is the likely cost of the Golden Mile, given you're only at 60% of the design? What increases are we likely to see?
Thanks, Councillor. I did cover this in the last presentation as well, in that when we actually do basically we do a base estimate in terms of the cost of construction, and then after that we then build in a number of risks to come up with what's called the P50. Now the P50 represents effectively a 50% probability that we expect the cost to come in under that level. We then basically look at the remaining risks, which does include is the cost of guess, delay in the project. It includes potential construction price increases. It includes the risk that, in fact, there could be some element of scope or design change as part of those things that haven't necessarily been completely locked down, and that's how we come up with our P95. Now, someone from the design team may be able to just explain the difference between the actual 60% in terms of outstanding decisions or outstanding things to the 100%. I don't have that detail at hand.
Yeah, we can probably jump in on that one. So the 60% design really had all the heavy hitting items in there. We worked really hard to ensure that there was an accurate representation of paving, of services, of so forth. Now, there's a whole lot of risk in there in terms of some of those items, which is really what that 60 to 100% is trying to pull down. And some of that is actually pulling down numbers and reducing costs, not always going north. But what we have tried in the 60%, and there is sets and some of the examples of the drawings at the back here, but it does have all the furniture items, all the lighting, all the paving, all the curbs, materials, pavement, construction, all within that. So it's all of those items, and it is then understanding clashes between things as we move forward and working through detailed levels, assessments and so forth. So it is really fine-tuning that and trying to reduce those items where things begin to clash.
But if it's just fine-tuning, I can't understand why it's only at 60%. I mean, I could understand if you said it's at 90% because you've got everything you need, and it's just you might have to move it a metre or 2 metres as opposed to...
So there's the documentation when you're working through that last 40%, so looking at levels, is down to the millimetre. We're talking about how we specify nuts and bolts. Those things are quantifiable at 60%, but aren't necessarily drawn at 60%. So we're working out, as an example, on a piece of furniture, how every little item goes together. The structural engineer is working through how that stands up, et cetera, et cetera. So it is putting the detail into those designs.
Yeah, but you're at I understand the Thorndon Quay Hut Road is at 100% design. So I just can't understand why you can. You've been working on these for a few years now. I can't understand why you can be at 100% with Thorndon Quay Hut Road, but still only at 60% for Golden Mile.
Yeah, sorry, Jan, I can answer that. So design has moved forward from 6%. So we're at an advanced stage, more than 60%. So we are getting closer to being able to issue our drawings as 100.
But these papers were just produced on Friday night, and you said 60%. So I just really would, where do you think you're actually at the moment, based on the costs that you've provided to us? Because can we rely on those costs of 139 million, or are they going to go up an extra 10, 20 million? What does that mean? That's what I'm really interested in. Is what could be the likely increases because you're only at 60% of the design.
As Dan said, that we've progressed our design, so we're right down to the nuts and bolts now. We're probably more sitting around the 80% mark, and so therefore level of confidence around costing is much higher.
So you've gone from 60% to 80%
over the last, and it's moving very, very quickly, the design, and we're still designing as we speak right now.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Kia ora. I just want to understand the business planning and support. Actually, I've got 2 questions. One around business planning and support. So once one decision, whatever decision is made on this week, how will we move into supporting business around timelines and understanding so that they can plan? And the second question is the Golden Mile improvements. How will this lead to the Wellington City's income benefiting in terms of what will the benefits of the Golden Mile improvements be for Wellington City Council's income and for the city in general? Sorry, back up to a very broad question, but it'd just be good to understand that.
Okay, I'll excuse me. I'll take the business support question. And then we might need to look to Selwyn, maybe if you've got some commentary on the other question. All right, so as we've said previously, there's there's a whole lot of support that the contractor must provide anyway. So things like access to business during trading hours, making sure that the businesses can get their deliveries, ensuring that transport routes are obstruction-free and well signposted, keeping open communication with businesses so they know what's happening, dust suppression, keeping sites safe and tidy, securing and locking equipment at night, ensuring there are lay-down areas, etc., and adequate lighting. So those things will happen for any construction project as a matter of course. And then there is a decision to be made, and just to assist you, what I have asked for today is it's detail, but normally we would be making this decision on Wednesday. I have asked to pull that forward to get the leadership team to make their recommendations overnight, and then our board. I'm just clarifying whether I need to go to the board, just because there's a financial component, and if I need to go to the board, we'll expedite that. So you will have the confirmed business support package and funding before your meeting on the 29th. What I can say is what we're working towards is exactly actually as you saw in the last presentation. So there's a plan where there would be funding shared between the program, and we are proposing to take that funding from our communications and engagement budget, and there is funding that is coming also from Wellington City Council. And the things that we're proposing for business, as was explained in the previous presentation, but also perhaps in addition. So there's the business advisory support that was spoken about, additional wayfinding, business targeted comms and promotional material. So, shop local, those sorts of initiatives. There might be some business profiling that can be done. Also scheduling works, so we're mindful of business needs. We are very aware of that, the December period and what that means for business. So it's important that we're working with business around that time. And other mitigation actions. So that's what's being discussed at the moment. There are things we can do, everything from providing coffee vouchers to people who get off the bus so that they can use local cafes. Providing incentives for people to get off the bus in the Golden Mile instead of perhaps a different stop they might use, those sorts of things. So there are a number of things we can do. That's what we're thinking about. So at this stage we have a plan that's relatively high level, and we would review that on an annual basis so that we are making sure that business are receiving best bang for buck in terms of investment, that we're meeting their needs and receiving their feedback. So that's the first question, and I might ask Selwyn if you've got some answers for the second one.
Thanks, Sarah. So just to clarify, the question was for the city itself, not City Council. Was that for the council? Oh, okay. That's probably not best answered by me if it's for the council.
Yeah, I wonder if council has an answer.
I think it might be beneficial to talk about the retail impact assessment report and the studies that were done into other cities where we've had this type of transformational change. I don't think there's been any specific work done on what the outcome to council would be as a result of these improvements.
So we'll take that offline anyway and see if there's any other information we can find, but that is a useful update. Sure. Thank you. All your questions? Cool. Councillor Pannett.
Thanks for your work on this. It's obviously been a lot. Can I just absolutely clarify, now that we've got our papers, whether it is legitimate to make any amendment or whether we can? Because I guess I feel that people have made submissions and asked us to make changes.
So are you talking about changes generally, or changes in terms of...
Very specific ones. So bus stops, I've got an issue around the cycleway along Lambton Quay. Yeah, so really specific ones, not
Okay.
hopefully undermining the whole thing.
So, look, of course, it's entirely within your power to ask for changes, and we will do everything that we can to accommodate those. We are obviously trying to work to a September start date, and that's the thing that may have to be compromised depending on the number of changes and the nature of them. So that's sort of one part of the answer. I guess the other part of the answer is it depends on how significant they are in terms of impact on benefit, and also just reminding you that you have another funding partner. If the benefits change and the changes don't deliver the same kinds of outcomes as what perhaps your other funding partner are expecting, then that might be an issue for funding further on.
Okay, because you'll know I'm going to be trying to bring the bus stops back, and I hope that will bring more benefits. My next question is, look, I've been speaking to cycling and walking advocates. They really aren't happy with the Lambton Quay cycleway. They're just the shared space. So can I just clarify, sorry, because we just get these papers and then you sort of have to make a decision. Is there enough space to do the cycleway, a proper cycle lane, a reasonable size pavement and reasonable bus shelters, because it's very narrow there, obviously? Or is there really the only answer then is to take people off, the cyclists off Lambton Quay, and to put them down Featherston? Thank you.
Yeah, so on Lambton Quay, the majority of the length of Lambton Quay, so from Balance Street right through to Panama Street, there is space. It gets squeezed down at the Old Bank Arcade, which is where we're not proposing to put one. And it also gets a little bit squeezed. We've had some quite detailed conversations with a number of parties around the Supreme Court. But we think we've got a solution there that works and suits everyone, but that is very tight. And as I say, Panama Street is very tight. The other areas where things get difficult is obviously where people are crossing the street and therefore crossing the cycleway. So Midland Park, for example. And in those locations, we prioritise the pedestrian zones rather than the cyclists.
Yeah. Sarah, so just following on from my question then, is that a major change? Because I'm obviously wanting to be very responsive to those groups.
Of course. Would you like to answer that?
Yes, Councillor, it would be a change in terms of slowing design down. So we have made good progress, and as I said before, we're still designing as we speak. So we'd have to start again, and then that would apply to an additional bus stop as well. So we'd have to factor that into our design as well, if you want to go down that path. So any changes at this point would cause us to pause and redo some designs. It may just be Lambton Quay in that particular example. I would have to look at the whole length of the Golden Mile just to double check. So that would be a pause there. And then there would be obviously flow-on effects to the construction price as well if we would add additional design elements. Even though they might be small on the face of it, it makes some complexity, and just how you build these sorts of projects in an urban centre does come with additional costs.
Okay. And last question, just around Courtney Place, the idea that you will let everyone back in after 7 o'clock, whether that's actually consistent with the idea that we'll have fewer cars. Is there a way of just maybe letting the Ubers and the taxis in to take people home after a good night out, but not private vehicle? Yeah, bad night, yeah.
Yes. Again, I'll ask the design team to answer, but I also know that some of the thinking around that was in regards to submissions on TRs as well.
Yeah, Councillor Pennant, I think I can probably answer that one. We've worked with the parking enforcement team on the enforcement and the permit scheme with authorisation system. We considered allowing Ubers and taxis onto Courtney Place after a certain time without a permit, but it's quite difficult for the system to do. Basically, it's really hard to authorise a lot of the Uber and other ride-share vehicles because you think how they look and the registration they link to, they can be providing service, or they can be undertaking private activity. So that's the difficulty there. We did consider.
I think the other point on that, Councillor Pannett, over here.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
The other point that Councillor Pannett is once you let cars in that just look like a regular car, other cars will most likely think that they have access rights as well. So this was an area where we compromised as a result of the public submissions, but we thought if you start to let taxis and Ubers in, all cars will come in because they'll see cars and think that it's just anyone can go in. So we might as well own that and make the decision.
Thank you. Could I go back on the list after everyone else has asked their questions? Thank you.
Yeah, just try to cap your questions to 3, short and succinct, and where possible, if you could answer yes or no, that would be great as well. Councillor Matthews.
It was great to see the new category for mobility permit holders. So I just want to clarify that covers, so that means all individual mobility permit holders will be able to apply, and also all total mobility providers?
Go for it.
Council, I understand that was a recent change, and the actual workings of that still need to be worked through, but that's my understanding, but I'd rather just default just for the time being around the detail.
That would be good to have that clarified before Thursday, if we need to put extra words in to clarify that would be great.
Councillor.
And my second one is just a slightly unresolved issue, and apologies if I missed it because the volume of material, but about food deliveries to Courtney Place, and it seemed like that was still a little bit unresolved prior to 7 o'clock, and I just, is work ongoing, about that issue, and can we sort of work further to see if we can resolve that particular one?
I think that now sits with council, so the traffic resolutions are set up. It's now sits with you what time you want to let those vehicles in. At the moment, it's now 7 o'clock. Yep.
Councillor McNulty.
I think part of it's been answered, so I was just confirming that the permit system ownership or management resides with WCC, which seems to be coming through. So we have the ability, if things aren't working, let's say we find courier drivers need desperate access to this during the day, to adapt to that as a council and make those decisions at a later point, don't we?
Yeah.
Yep.
Councillor Randall.
Thank you. I just wonder if you explain, because I've still got some big questions which I'll get to in a minute. What would the cost be if it was decided to just, rather than vote up or down, but just to pause consideration of the Golden Mile traffic resolution and package until August, September?
I'm not sure if we've done any work on that, so we couldn't answer that specifically right this minute, but we could go away and have a look for you. Delay always costs you money, so that's the first thing to be aware of. Obviously, you have a contractor involved who, has planned for the work, so there might be some discussion required with the contractor as well. But primarily, delay does cost, and also if you were to defer, then of course that's not just your own deferral, but that's deferral for Waka Kotahi as well. So the processes we would be going through with Waka Kotahi would have to wait until you had made your decisions as well.
Okay. Just wanted to check too, has there been any analysis on the economic impact of the construction period on businesses? And if so, what does that say?
No, I'm not aware of any analysis. Just like the benefits from all the extra construction workers, I'm not aware of that analysis. Yep.
So the construction impact, I know there's a cost impact in the benefit analysis, but there's not benefit cost analysis, but there's not a construction impact on when a street is like dug up and people can't get to businesses.
So the idea is that people will be able to get to businesses. That's what we're planning for, and as I explained just when I was talking about business support, the things that the contractor needs to ensure is that access can be maintained to businesses.
Okay. Right, so where are we up to now? I'm just a bit puzzled. I've been looking at it's claiming a benefit for public transport, a health benefit for walking, for public transport. I'm a bit confused in the sense to say that, those people who you're claiming the benefit for used to drive. They could, if they want to take public transport, they'll be doing it now. So I'm just wondering why there's a benefit there and not a disbenefit, in the sense that they didn't want to do it.
I can have Danielle answer that question. Danielle, are you online?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, sure. So there's a positive benefit for the mode shift to public transport, which relates to the additional walking at each end of a public transport trip. So walking to the bus stop at the start of your journey and walking from the bus stop at the end of your journey. There is a disbenefit captured for people who previously drove and no longer do drive in the option, and that's captured through the vehicle travel time disbenefit. And that there's a rule of half that's applied to people who change their mode. The rule of half is kind of explained in the guidance, but the idea behind it is that if you're sort of on the edge of being willing to shift your mode, it means you're not as time sensitive as other people. You're, something taking 1 minute longer, if that's enough to shift you to another mode, then you get some disbenefit, but not the full disbenefit because you were willing and ready to shift mode. So it's a little bit tricky, the rule of half, to explain, but it is captured there, and everyone who no longer drives does experience some disbenefit through that.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I'm very confused because the disbenefit's only 24 million, whereas the health benefit's 111 million, which is much, much bigger. I just reiterate, I can't see why people who currently drive, who choose to drive, would see public transport as, let's say, 4 or 5 times better than what they're doing now, which is what this analysis is showing. Also, does it include...
apologies, Councillor. I'll have to move on, but I'll add you to the end if you want. Councillor Wineta.
Kia ora, team. Hey, if I might, excuse me, just a couple of questions on some of the, I guess, more public-facing or artistic elements of the design. So, as I understand, there were originally 7 Ngauranga sculptures or design features of some kind, I'm not an artist, which were made from different materials dotted along the Golden Mile. Could you just confirm to me whether those are present in the current design and whether they will be retained going into further iterations of the design?
Yes, so the Ngāuranga, which are basically resting places along the Golden Mile, they're situated at key points. So there's one at Balance Street, one at various spaces. There's one by Midland Park and one down near Panama Street. During the at the 60% design stage, we had 4 of those drawn rather than 7. So, and one of those was more of a play space, so it was water as well. Currently, we've got 3 of those that are currently sitting in the design within the numbers that we're talking about. So there's one of those has been fully detailed, and that one's on the Stout Street corner. The other 2, the intention is to keep those in the design. So there's 3 versus 4 rather than 7, down to 1.
Secondly, is there mention in this iteration of the plan about the way in which street furniture will be designed? And is there provision in there that ensures it's going to be accessible to all, including rough sleepers?
So again, during the 60% and the documentation of that, there's quite a bit of work around the seating. As we sort of alluded to before, what we've got into is the nuts and bolts of how that's put together. So, and there's some packs of information around. You've probably got one in your hand there, which illustrates how that design has been developed. So that 60% going through towards the 80% that Selwyn mentioned. So the design of that is inclusive of armrests, which are good in terms of accessibility, in terms of being able to push yourself in and out. Those are designed separately, so we can either have those or not have those. So in terms of whether or not you want to lie down on a seat, we can the design is flexible enough that we can be quite specific around where we want armrests and where we want accessibility and where we want to allow larger groups to sit or whatever it be. So that's all incorporated in that design as it's moved from 60 to 80%.
Okay, thank you. That'd be great. Can I have one more?
One more.
Is that right? Just on delivery vehicles, I might just have to get a sanity check on this, but I heard it at one stage perhaps that there was a preference for larger trucks being prioritised to deliver things as opposed to smaller vehicles into those side streets, into those loading zones. Is that correct, or am I making that up?
Just quickly, so delivery vehicles 6 metres less are encouraged to use the side roads. If they can't, they can get a permit to go onto the Golden Mile. Vehicles longer than that that can't make those turning movements can get a permit and go onto the Golden Mile off-peak.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got just under 10 minutes left, so can I please ask questions are short, no reckons, and answers short where possible. Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. For Thornton Quay, you said the cost has now gone to 93.6 million. What is that up from? What was the original business case?
Just be with me
I couldn't
a moment
see it.
and
I
I
was
will
just looking for
find you the
it.
information. Okay, so at the SSBC for Thornton Quay and Hutt Road, the P95 cost was 77 million, and the detailed design cost at P95 is 94.
Okay. And so does that include the AT Quay roundabout work?
Yes.
It does, okay. What's the approximate cost around that?
Around the roundabout?
Yeah.
Bear with me. It's about 14 million.
Okay. Does that include the purchase of the land as well that's needed for it? Or is that separate?
No, it does include the land purchase.
It does?
It does. Yes.
Okay. You talked this morning about an extra 25, I think it was 25 million if you needed to build an underbridge.
Sure. So I think it's really important that we hear from Sarah about that, because she can clarify exactly how those costs have been treated.
Yeah.
So initially when we did the SSBC and with discussions of Whakatahi, there was a provision for the plan to have about 25 million, and there was an alternative which was an awful lot cheaper that's sitting around about 4 million. So that's kind of give you the difference between the two options. Obviously, given that the $4 million option is obviously way more cost desirable, there was some work done by the program to actually put that through a pilot to actually assess the reasonableness of that solution. At this stage, that solution does look like it is going to be one that will work, but obviously we're still continuing through that pilot stage, so there is some risk involved that it does end up being a higher cost, but as Sarah mentioned this morning, the cost of the connection is 100% Whakatahi funded.
So that would be on top, if there's any extra money other than 4 million, that would be on top of the 93 million.
At the moment, it
budget.
would be Councillor Calvert, but as I said, the pilot process at the moment has taken it through to a level of satisfaction that we do not think that that is required for that P95 even. So we actually have a 95%. We're basically at the point of going, we think the situation of needing that higher funding at this stage is quite low.
Okay. And it was just following on from Councillor Fern's question, but just, I mean, we've heard about a lot of benefits from a transport perspective, and I understand doing the Whakatahi guidelines, but can you tell us what is the value to our council, to our ratepayers, or point me to where it is in the papers about how we will recover the money that we're spending or putting into these projects, whether it's through value uplift, or have you got that information? And taking into account decreased parking revenue as well.
So I think to a degree that's probably a question best directed to council. Is there anything that the team have looked at?
Oh, I'll just answer as I did before. I'm not aware that we've done any of that work.
Okay.
Or have any of that analysis.
Thank you.
Councillor Pennant.
Thanks. Look, I might be missing something, but the authorisation system confuses me. Does every time, like if you have to do a delivery 3 times a week, do you need to get 3 separate permits?
Yeah, we've worked extensively with the parking enforcement team at council, and really depends on the situation. Then there is option to issue a one-off permit, or if they do it 3 times a week, a few times a month, they can potentially get a 6 or 12-month permit, really depending on the situation. And we have considered some very emergency type of situation as well. And there is the intention is if they have to go through there, get a ticket, but council will consider that afterwards, just like how they deal with some of the bus lane situation at the moment.
And there'll be a right of appeal.
Correct.
Yeah, thanks.
And finally, Councillor Randall.
Thank you. I too am very concerned about the mobility idea, especially providing mobility mobility access. I note that in the report, page 114, there's actually a section in there that says that the options to add an authorisation category for permit holders were considered but discounted due to pressure were placed on the stopping places in the Golden Mile. The concern is that the loading zones within the corridor become oversubscribed and leading to either illegal stopping in the special vehicle lane, which would affect moving of buses, or illegal stopping on the footpath or bike lane. This is in your report, but you've added it as now a permission. Are you really sure you've got enough space to add mobility park access to the service vehicle access?
Sorry, councillor, I'm not familiar with page 114 off the top of my head. But if the question is, can mobility users use the loading bays as they are? Is that the question?
It says that your report says that it was discounted. This option was discounted because you were concerned that there weren't enough loading bays.
Yeah,
and
so
now you're saying there's enough.
Yeah, so I guess the starting point is the more vehicles we put on the Golden Mile now, the greater impacts we'll have on the bus process. So that's our starting point. If councillors want to make a change to that and have mobility access onto the Golden Mile using those loading bays, provided there's no physical changes to our design, then that's a decision that resides with council. Now, that mobility access may not be that frequent and may not have as big an impact, and might be something you can monitor over time as well. So
I think, Councillor, what we were saying is in response to a lot of submissions around accessibility for the Golden Mile, we decided this was a trade-off that was worth making. Our relationship with the Golden Mile doesn't stop with this Golden Mile project. We will be monitoring. If we need to make further changes, we can do that as a council. But what we're saying is let's be a bit more permissive here in order to get those accessibility benefits, and let's see how it goes, and let's monitor it.
Okay. Second question is around the modelling with the traffic impact. You outlined earlier that Featherston Street was assumed to have no changes on it, but this morning we heard that it's likely to need a bus lane on it, at least for the second spine. You were going ahead with this project, but we have this other work that's going to remove much more lane space, let's say, next door. How can we be sure what the real traffic impact will be in a couple of years' time?
So when we did our traffic modelling, it was a year and a half ago. So projects move on. A number of projects have moved on. So at the time when we modelled the impacts, the designs for Featherston Street hadn't been settled. The bus service that you're talking about going down Featherston is during construction. So we need to put the buses somewhere during construction. So that there will be some impacts on Featherston Street, and some permanent impacts on Featherston Street as well. But we do have to continuously, as a program, continue to model the projects as they come into development, and we have a better idea.
Yeah.
Apologies, Councillor. I need to wrap it up there.
Just one more question.
One last one.
Yeah, last question. So I'm a bit concerned about also access to emergency services, and like fire service and such like. How is it going to happen if a fire truck has to attend an alarm on the street, and can they get across the block streets, in terms of the ladder trucks and everything? Is that confirmed with the fire service and ambulance and such like?
Short answer is yes. Long answer, we've consulted with them extensively and made sure that we've incorporated their design requirements into our design.
Okay.
Oh, thank you for that. I really appreciate your time again. I know you've been here a bit over the last week, but we really appreciate it. Thank you, team.
Welcome. We're still happy to accept questions online, and we will do our very best to answer them in plenty of time for for your decision making.
Thank you. Thank you.